So we all know about the Bible, we all know about the Big Bang and all that stuff. We all know that the universe is basically expanding, and some say that it will likely contract at some point. Awful lot like breathing, awful lot like a whole lot of things. To me, it looks like sleeping and waking cycles. It looks like massive sleeping and waking cycles. And it would make sense that during a sleeping cycle, it would all collapse into a single point. Everything's abstract. There's no form. Maybe there's form here or there, and it's almost like dreaming. And during that period of time, reality just isn't reality. And during the waking cycle, it just expands out, almost like our own awareness when we wake up in the morning, and it starts to take form. And the form that it takes may or may not have to do with what is dreamt, but the fact of the matter is, as reality expands, it takes form. So this entity decides on its body, its shape, it awful lot like me, except godly, pictures of the angels and shit. So when I think of the divine or God or whatever, I basically think of us, but better or more or whatever. But we're basically quote unquote in that image. So here we have it. Now, infinite time. Think about infinite fucking time, man. Think about you're the creator of the universe, you can do whatever the fuck you want, and you have infinite time. The first thing you're going to do, obviously, is set up situations where you're the winner, you get the girl, you're the king, and everything is fantastic all the time. So, this goes back to Alan Watts, a story that he told. Um, you can only do that for so long. Imagine 75 years of perfection, 100 years, a billion years. A long, long time of this. So, after a while, you just get tired. So you start to add in some risk. You start to, maybe you won't get the girl. Maybe the girl is a little, she's not as receptive to your charms. Maybe you'll lose the fight. Maybe you have to run against somebody to be the king. Whatever it is, over time, when you lay your head down at night, you know you're God. And you whittle that down. You take the timeline long enough. If you're some sort of creator and you have full control over everything that happens, eventually you're going to create a situation where you're living vicariously through an entity that is of your essence, that has no idea what it's doing. I mean, that's the ultimate ride for a god. To not know what the fuck you are. So here we are. This is the inevitable spot. God makes his angels, okay, but the angels are not for counsel, they're mostly for company. They're like soldiers. They take care of tasks, but they have to feel useful too. So obviously this god, architect, whatever, can do whatever. So he's going to divvy some of those things out. But angels are, quote unquote angels, are immortal. They're not susceptible to dying. So it was always going to be the case that a god or architect would first make some sort of angel type thing, live with it, understand it, and then create something underneath that as a mortal. And mortality is a gift. The only thing an immortal entity does not have is mortality. So mortality is the beginning of meaning. Mortality is given as a gift, and our relationship to this architect, God, or whatever, is exactly like that of parents to children. Um, when your children love you, it's the best when it's because of your relationship. You don't want to just be able to snap your fingers and your kid loves you because you know that love is not real. So when they're animating it, you don't even really, you won't accept it because it's, you did that. So free will is a barrier, but it also allows the possibility that you may hate, love, or whatever of your relationship to the architect or God or whatever. It's sincere. It's the beginning of a situation where an object or an arrangement such as a human becomes non-determined. So here's the story. You make the planet, and you have the angels, all this stuff, and God's up in heaven with his people, and a group of these angels looks down at Earth and sees these people, and this is now for the first time something underneath them. They've always been right under God, but they've never had the position that God has. So they look down there and they're like, well, there's some people down there, and they're mortal and they're flesh and all this stuff, but they're under us. We could rule them. So a group of them comes to Earth and starts to just run the fucking show. And Big Man Upstairs lets it happen because, like I said, free will. He wants what will happen. What will they do? What will they choose? And nobody tells the story this way. This is the interesting way to tell the story. It was a rebellion down to earth. So they come down here. They teach humanity city planning, politics, how to make shields. They teach them, that there's metal materials in the stone. They teach them how to arrange what's on Earth to create basically civilizations. But the whole thing started to go sour. Eventually, over time, nobody believed in the quote-unquote real God or the architect anymore. Everybody believed in these clusters all over the planet of quote-unquote fallen angels who had picked their own little territories to rule, which was the beginning of the current nations that we have. These demigods, Zeus, all these people are recycled names from the original rebellion and some of their offspring, their children that came later. And there was only one man on earth who continued to believe in God, and that was Enoch. And he was rewarded. So it got so bad on earth, everything was so poorly managed because of just poor rule, poor everything. And the children of these fallen angels just started eating people. It was absolute chaos, which was the spark for the flood. This is when the flood happens to basically wipe the slate clean. Be like, okay, dude, like y'all fucked up. You picked the wrong person. Enoch's the only one who remembered what was going on, and I gotta flood this bitch and start over. And which is the whole Noah story. But Noah is the grandson of Enoch, which is why he's chosen to do this. To take all the animals and repopulate. You can take all the stuff literally with the animals and all that, but that was the idea to start over. Back to Enoch, he became an ambassador, basically the deal maker between God and the fallen angels. He was the guy who went back and forth between Michael, God, and the fallen angels. And hell, Sheol, it was originally called, didn't exist at this point. It was Sheol and / hell was specifically created for those who rebelled, the rebellious angels, and anybody who identified with their cause then and in the future, which leads to a lot of stuff that's going on now and has been ever since. But that spirit has existed ever since, and the influence of the original rebellion has existed in various ways to various cultures over time. But Enoch was the only one, and he got a personal tour of the universe for 365 years, which sounds astronomical, but I'm sure there was some weird time shit going on there. But yeah, Enoch gets a personal tour of the universe. He sees God. He is the first human being to see him, and this is how he described it. He said, God sat on a throne. He had the body of a man, but his head, his face, was just pure radiating light that was so bright you couldn't look at it. You had to keep your head down because it was just too bright, and it was the source of all things. It was healing, it was arranging, it was and is the thing that arranges everything. It's the mind. It's like, you in your own room, your mind is the illuminating thing that puts order to everything. And yeah, that's what he said. He said he couldn't look. His face was just light. It wasn't like a man's face. It was just light, basically on some shoulders, on a human body. And yeah, Michael gave him a personal tour of the universe. He showed him hell. He showed him heaven, and he's like, "This is what's up." Enoch goes in painstaking detail to describe heaven and hell. Um, he describes it all, and no human being goes to hell. Just you don't just die and go to hell. You. There's almost like this. I don't want to call it purgatory, but there's this pre-area um, before you get judged eventually, and everybody gets judged at the same time, like which hasn't happened yet, but that's a whole other thing. So Enoch is totally rewarded. He gets a personal tour of the universe. He gets to meet God and all the cool angels, like literally all the ones who are like more well known, and he's brought back to Earth, and then the flood is scheduled to happen. So his grandson is chosen, Noah, to basically like reset humanity. But after humanity's reset, God plans to come down to Earth to have a talk. So after the flood, um, everything's reset. But the flood didn't kill everybody. There was a few kingdoms, there was a few scragglers who somehow managed to survive, some descendants, and they're dealt with later, not by God, but by people who are like spoken to from God. Like he gets people to do it eventually, but um, yeah. So this is when Abraham starts, and this is when the Bible starts. Like right around, I mean, the real stories of the Bible start around the flood, and yeah, the story is post flood, God is going to come down to earth. He's going to have a talk with everybody, and all past sins, the worst sin of all, identifying wholly and completely with the rebellion, is getting wiped clean. And this is also a statement of, yes, I made you, yes, you suffer, but I'm going to feel all of your suffering, all of it. When God comes down to earth and gets up on the cross, his intention is to permeate. He wants the story to never be forgotten, and he wants to do something that's going to permeate across the world and just never be forgotten. So he comes down in the form of a dude and physically takes on all past suffering, all present suffering and sin, and all potential future sin and suffering all at once. So that at any point in the future, any human being who's going through anything, he can say, I know, I literally experienced that too. And it's said that when he was on the cross, he just cried out because it was just so intense, which I can imagine. I mean, my suffering, anybody's suffering is enough, but all human suffering and all potential human suffering is unbelievable for a nervous system. Well, that's the plan. Um, and it's my thought. This is my personal thought, but I think once God came down here and left, he took his hands off the wheel. Like, he was involved with all kinds of things. He flooded this motherfucker. He had all kinds of things going on with all kinds of people on Earth, all throughout the Bible. But I think once he came down here, he took his hands off the wheel and just said, like, it's up to you now. I mean, I'm sure there's interventions, I'm sure there's things here and there, but overall, the direction of the planet is in humanity's hands. When a baby is born with cancer, like, our own decisions for a long, long time have contributed to our biological and genetic makeup. We are like poisoning ourselves. So when somebody says something is like an act of God or it's God's will, it's not. Um, it's completely this is like our decision time, our time to do things. So it's also said that he makes a return after this period of time where humanity figures out what it wants and what it's doing. This war that's supposed to happen, but yeah, I mean, you think about that situation. Say you create a universe and you get it all the way down to where you make human beings who feel all this stuff and experience all this stuff. And at some point during that, you decide to say, "Hey, I'm coming down. I'm going down there. Um, I'm gonna get some dudes to write a book, um, and put it together." And like, what? Me personally, like, I don't know what iteration number it would take me to do that, to go down to the environment that I created with things that I created and take on their suffering and pain for no reason. That's fucking wild, dude. Think about it like this too. A being, like I said earlier, with immortality has immortality. So there is no deeper possible experience than to be this intelligent entity like a human being and not know what's going on. Not know who did it, who started it, where it's going, who you are, who anybody is. Some people don't even know, me included. Sometimes you think, this is my world and everybody else is in it. Like it's everybody feels this sense of the center. And in this universe, any point could be considered the center. So a god in that scenario, creating a being like us and living vicariously through us, gives meaning. There's nothing more meaningful that such an entity could experience than to plug into us, just living our life, not knowing. And another Alan Watts gem is on a long enough timeline, basically, a god ends up inevitably creating this, your life, this circumstance is an inevitable destination for any universe. So the thing that splits us off from determinism is, so you have two asteroids in space on a collision course, they will collide. But two human beings on a collision course can see their trajectory, their momentum, can detect every characteristic and multiple threads of what's going on and choose to turn. That's the difference. We have characteristics with objects, we have our own momentum, we have all these things, but we have that faculty to deviate and create a new timeline and shift our momentum. So back to the story. The Bible isn't clear. It doesn't clarify a lot of information. Like, obviously, doesn't say what iteration this is, what universe number this is, because it's not the first. There's no way that this is the first go around. Um, I think God intentionally chose the form of male in relationship to how humanity perceives and deals with and animates male. I think it's a thing of sort of order or authority or, um, yeah, I think that's why it was specifically non-ambiguously a male. You know, there was never any ambiguity about it. Um, but like I said, that's this iteration. Who knows what there's been and what there will be. Um, so yeah, that's the most interesting story in the world. Um, it involves reality being made by some sort of architect and a rebellion at some point, and then post-rebellion, that original architect going down to the environment he made to embody the worst of the worst of all time for all people so that they may have a shot, which is a fucking insane situation, dude. I mean, think about it. Maybe there was some iteration where that didn't happen, and humanity was just lost forever. You know? I mean, if souls truly are eternal, then there's some sort of recycling going on. And another thing, the Bible very specifically says, it's almost oddly stand out, where he says, I am a jealous God. That statement alone is a floodgate of information because by that statement, I am a jealous God, says that we're jealous too. The full range of human emotion is within him as well. It's a very like gem of a glimpse on how this architect works like us. I mean, to put that in there, I'm a jealous God. Like that's, you know, emotion. That's you have to sit. That's how can a God be jealous in a determined universe? If this entity is responsible for all action, there's no such thing as jealousy. Yeah, jealousy is an emotion that exists only when the object of our affection is engaging and delivering the affection that should be for us to something or someone else. That doesn't happen in a fully determined universe. And that goes right back to the specific claim of free will. It is a protective barrier against determinism. It gives you this shield of full autonomy, and you will do with it what you will, and we always have. When you say you trust in God, you're saying you trust in this scheme of things. And there is always a clear path because our mind works in the same way, just not as powerfully. Interesting that we're born into a universe that is completely alien, into a body that is completely alien, both of which we have to explore and discover along the way. The thing that we have in common is the core of cores is this center of purely objective awareness that holds no knowledge but wants to know everything. It's constantly shining out of the eyes, out of the ears, and in every nerve ending in our bodies. And it wants to know. But it only has so much time. Mortality. It's what gives the whole game its juice. This eternal core has a temporary surrounding to accrue as much satisfaction and knowledge as possible.